You know that feeling when you wake up at 3 in the morning and something just feels wrong? Like your body knows something your mind hasn't caught up to yet? That's where this story starts. And I'm still not entirely sure I'm ready to talk about it, but I've been holding this in for too long. It was a Tuesday night in October about 2 years ago. I was living alone in a rental house just outside Asheville, North Carolina. Nothing fancy, just a small place with creaky floors and old pipes that would bang in the walls at random times. The kind of house that makes noise, you know. The kind where you get used to things going bump in the night because it's just the house settling. I was in bed, completely asleep, and then suddenly I wasn't. My eyes just opened. No dream that woke me up, no sound that I could remember. Just a sudden awareness that I was conscious, and the first thing I noticed was that my bedroom door was open. I remembered closing it. I always close my bedroom door, it's just a habit. But there it was, standing wide open, and the hallway beyond was pitch black. I lay there for what felt like forever, but was probably only 30 seconds staring at that open door. My heart was already picking up speed. I told myself it was nothing. Old houses settle. Doors swing open on their own. But something in my chest wasn't buying it. Then I heard it. A sound from downstairs. It wasn't loud. It was actually really quiet. Just a soft thud, like something had been set down on the kitchen counter. My kitchen counter was directly below my bedroom. I got out of bed slowly. I wasn't thinking clearly. If I had been, I probably would have locked my door and called the police. But instead, I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and turned on the flashlight. The beam was weak in the darkness, and it took me a moment to work up the courage to step into the hallway. I moved toward the stairs, each step deliberate. The house was completely silent now, except for the sound of my breathing and the blood rushing in my ears. When I got to the top of the staircase, I shined my phone down into the darkness below. Nothing. Just the outline of my living room furniture and the vague shape of the kitchen entrance on the far side. I should have called the police then, I know that now. But I was convinced I'd woken myself up over nothing, that I'd imagined that sound. So I went downstairs. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness as I descended, and everything looked normal. The living room was exactly as I'd left it. My coffee mug was still on the side table, the TV remote was on the couch, everything was fine except the kitchen. The back door was open, not just unlocked, open, wide open, letting in the cool October air, and I knew, absolutely knew that I had locked that door. I always locked that door. It was the first thing I did when I came home from work. That's when the real fear hit me. Not the nervous energy from before, but actual primal fear. Someone had been in my house. Someone might still be in my house. I didn't think. I just ran back upstairs to my bedroom, locked the door, and called 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. The dispatcher asked me if I was safe, if anyone was in the house with me, and I told her I didn't know. I told her that my back door was open and I didn't remember opening it. The police arrived maybe 8 minutes later. It felt like hours. I watched from my bedroom window as their lights pulled into my driveway, and I felt this wave of relief so intense it made me dizzy. They cleared the house, every room, every closet, and they found nothing. No signs of forced entry on the back door. No evidence that anyone had actually been inside. The officer kept asking me questions. Did I live alone? Could I have just forgotten that I left the door open? But I knew I hadn't. I knew it with absolute certainty. They took a report and told me to call if anything else happened. They suggested I get better locks, maybe some cameras. They were professional and kind, but I could tell they thought I was being paranoid. Just another person freaking out over nothing. But here's where it gets worse. The next morning I was making coffee in my kitchen, still on edge, but trying to convince myself that everything was fine, that it had all been some weird misunderstanding. And I noticed something. There was a glass on the counter, a water glass, and it was sitting in a specific spot right in front of the sink. I remembered that sound from the night before, that soft thud. That must have been it. Except I knew I hadn't left that glass there, and when I picked it up, there was still water in it. Not much, just maybe an inch, but it was definitely water. And it was cold. I stood there holding that glass, feeling my stomach drop. Someone had been in my house. They had gotten a glass of water. I called the police again, told them about the glass. They came back, took it for evidence, dusted it for prints. But nothing came back. No matches, no leads. The detective told me it was possible the glass had been there for days and I just didn't notice it. She suggested I had probably left it there myself and forgotten. But I hadn't. I stayed in that house for 3 more days. 3 days where I barely slept, where I checked every lock obsessively, where I jumped at every creak and groan the house made. And nothing else happened. There were no more open doors, no more sounds in the night. It was like whatever had happened was over. Except it wasn't over. Not really. About a week later, I got a package in the mail. No return address, no shipping label. Just my name written on it in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a photograph. It was taken from above, looking down at me sleeping. You could see my face clearly. You could see the details of my bedroom. You could see the exact position I was lying in the night my door opened. And on the back, written in the same handwriting, were 2 words. Third time. I moved out that day. I packed everything I could fit in my car and drove to my sister's house 3 hours away. I didn't go back to get anything else. I just left. I reported it to the police again, showed them the photograph. They investigated, but they never found anyone. The photo had no prints on it. The handwriting didn't match anything in their database. It was like a ghost had sent it, except I don't believe in ghosts. What I do believe in is that someone was in my house multiple times, and that photograph means they were there while I was sleeping, watching me close enough to take a picture. Close enough to touch me if they'd wanted to. The worst part? I don't know they wanted. I don't know if they were someone I knew, someone local, or a complete stranger. That uncertainty is what kept me up at night for months. That uncertainty is what still keeps me up sometimes, even now. The police never solved it. The case went cold. And I've spent 2 years wondering if that person is still out there, if they're watching someone else the way they watched me. If they're sending photographs to another house, another bedroom. I moved to a different state. I got an alarm system. I sleep with my door locked and my phone within arm's reach. But I never feel completely safe anymore. Because the truth is, if someone wants to get into your house while you're sleeping, there's probably not much that will stop them. And the scariest part of all is not knowing why. It started like any other Saturday. I was driving home from my friend's place around 2 a.m. heading back to my apartment in Columbus, Ohio. The highway was empty. Just me, my headlights cutting through the dark and the hum of my engine. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt, the kind of quiet you don't get much of anymore. That's when I noticed the car. It was behind me, a dark sedan maybe a mile back. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, but something about the way it was moving felt deliberate, methodical. Every time I changed lanes, it changed lanes too. Every time I sped up, it sped up. I told myself I was being paranoid. It was late. My brain was tired. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I took an exit I didn't need just to test it. The sedan took the same exit. My heart started climbing. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, telling myself to stay calm, stay rational. There could be 100 reasons. Maybe they lived in the same direction. Maybe it was a coincidence. But my gut was screaming something different. I drove toward the nearest gas station, the Speedway on Route 70. I figured if I pulled in, if there were lights and people and cameras, whatever was happening would stop. The car followed me right into the parking lot. I pulled up near the entrance, threw the car in park, and watched in my side mirror. The sedan pulled in too, but slowly. It parked 3 spots down from me, the engine still running. I could see the silhouette of a driver inside, but nothing more. Just a shape. Just darkness. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, frozen. Then the driver's side door opened. A man stepped out, tall, thin. He was wearing dark clothes and he started walking toward the gas station entrance. But as he walked, he turned his head and looked directly at my car. Directly at me. Even in the bad light of the parking lot, I felt it. That moment when you lock eyes with someone and you know they see you, and you know they're thinking about you. He went inside. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called 911. I remember my voice cracking as I told the dispatcher where I was, that someone had been following me, that I was scared. She told me to stay in my car, lock the doors, and that an officer was on the way. I watched the gas station. 5 minutes passed. 10. The man didn't come back out. A police cruiser pulled into the parking lot about 8 minutes later. The officer got out, looked around, and then came over to my window. I rolled it down, and I could see he was already skeptical. I pointed to the sedan, told him everything. He took my information, then walked over to the other car. It was empty. No one inside. No one in the gas station either, according to the officer who went in to check. The sedan's registration came back to an address in Delaware, over an hour away. The officer told me there wasn't much they could do, that I could follow them to the station if I was scared, or he could do a report. I felt stupid. I felt like I'd overreacted. So I declined, got back in my car, and decided I was just going to go home. The officer left. I sat there for a few more minutes, trying to convince myself that I was safe, that I'd been paranoid, that the guy probably just went inside to use the bathroom and would come back out any minute. My hands were still shaking. My mouth was dry. I pulled out of the gas station and got back on the highway. The sedan was waiting for me at the on-ramp. This time I didn't try to be subtle. I floored it. 60, 70, 80 miles per hour. The sedan kept pace. Now I was genuinely terrified. I called 911 again while driving, my voice high and panicked, telling the dispatcher that the car was back, that I was being actively pursued. She tried to keep me on the line, asking for my location, but I was so focused on the road and the rear-view mirror that I almost missed the exit. I took it hard, tires squealing. I drove through a residential neighborhood, cutting through streets at random, trying to shake them. Left, right, left again. Nothing but dark houses and empty roads. I didn't know where I was anymore. The sedan was still there. I turned down a dead-end street and immediately realized my mistake. It was a cul-de-sac. I was trapped. I put the car in park, locked all the doors, and watched as the sedan slowly turned in after me. It pulled up right behind me and stopped. Just stopped. The headlights were bright, blinding me when I looked in the mirror. I could see the silhouette of the driver again, but nothing more. Nothing useful. Just that shape. That presence. I was on the phone with 911 the entire time. The dispatcher was telling me officers were coming, that I needed to stay in my vehicle with the doors locked. I said okay, okay, okay over and over, but I wasn't thinking about what she was saying. I was thinking about how isolated I was, how far away the nearest house seemed, how long it would take for anyone to find me if something went wrong. Then the sedan's headlights went dark. The driver got out. In the darkness, I could barely see him moving toward my car. I don't know if I was screaming or if it just felt like I was. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the phone to my ear. The dispatcher was yelling at me to run, to get out of my car and run to the nearest house with a light on. But I was paralyzed, completely frozen. The man reached my window. He raised his hand and I thought this was it. This was how it ended. But instead of hitting the glass or trying the door handle, he just placed his palm flat against the window. He leaned in close. His face was finally visible in what little ambient light there was. He stood like that for 3 seconds. Then he walked back to his car, got in, and drove away. Within 5 minutes, police cars surrounded me. I was sobbing. An officer opened my door and pulled me out, wrapping a blanket around me, asking if I was hurt. I kept saying I wasn't, that he hadn't touched me, that he'd just stood there. They found the sedan 2 blocks away, abandoned, engine still warm. The plates were reported stolen from a different vehicle 3 counties over. The car itself was reported stolen weeks earlier. The inside was completely clean. No registration, no personal items, nothing. No fingerprints, no leads. They never found him. I gave a description and it went into a database somewhere. They asked if I wanted to press charges for following and harassment, but I didn't even know his name. They did check if he had any connection to my address, my work, anything. Nothing. It was like he appeared out of nowhere just to prove that he could scare me, and then he vanished. The detective told me it was possible he was just looking for an easy target, someone to scare. A game. He said it happens more than people realize. Some people get off on it. The feeling of power over someone completely vulnerable. I moved 6 months later. I still don't drive late at night. I still check my mirrors more than I should. And on nights when I'm alone, when it's dark and quiet, I think about that moment when his palm was pressed against my window. I think about how easily it could have gone differently. How many people don't get that second chance? How dead of night you're never really as safe as you think you are. I'm going to tell you something that happened to me 3 years ago. I still don't sleep well. I still check my doors twice before bed. It started on a Tuesday night in March. I was working the night shift at a warehouse distribution center outside of Columbus, Ohio. Not glamorous work, but it paid the bills. The shift ran from 10 at night until 6 in the morning, and most nights it was just me. Maybe one or two other guys and a whole lot of boxes to sort and load onto trucks. That particular Tuesday I was alone. My coworker called in sick around 9:30 and the supervisor basically said good luck and left me to it. It wasn't unusual. I'd done solo shifts plenty of times before. The warehouse was well lit, climate controlled, and honestly it was kind of peaceful when nobody else was there. I could work at my own pace, listen to music through my earbuds, and just exist in my own head for 8 hours. I was about 3 hours into the shift when everything changed. I noticed it first in the break room. The coffee maker was on. I know that sounds small, but it matters because I hadn't touched it. I hadn't made any coffee that night. I never do because the coffee there tastes like burnt rubber. So I stood there for a second staring at this machine that was clearly running, steam rising from the top of the pot, and I felt my stomach do this weird flip. I figured maybe the night supervisor had made it before he left. Sometimes he did that, so I turned it off, didn't think much of it, and went back to work. But then, around 2 in the morning, I heard something that made me stop what I was doing. The loading dock door at the back of the warehouse was opening. I could hear the mechanical sound of it, that familiar grinding noise as it rolled up. My heart started beating faster. We had a security system, a code. Nobody should have been able to get in without the alarm going off, and nothing had triggered. I waited, listening. My earbuds were still in, so I pulled them out and just stood there in the middle of the warehouse floor, surrounded by pallets and boxes. The door finished opening. Silence, complete silence. And then I heard footsteps, heavy footsteps on the concrete floor of the dock. Slow, deliberate, like someone was taking their time walking inside. I didn't move. I was gripping a box cutter in my hand, the only thing close to a weapon I had, and I was trying to figure out if I should call 911 or walk back to see who it was. My phone was in my locker, which was in the opposite direction, away from whoever this was. The footsteps stopped. I waited. Maybe 30 seconds went by. Maybe a minute. Time does weird things when you're scared. Then I heard something else. The sound of someone moving boxes, not frantically, not like they were looking for something specific. Just moving things around, picking things up and putting them down. I made a decision. I was going to walk back there and see what was happening. I told myself I was being stupid, that it was probably a supervisor I didn't know or a delivery person who'd gotten a late start on a pickup, but I knew in my gut that wasn't right. The way those footsteps sounded, the way the door had opened without an alarm. I walked toward the loading dock, staying in the shadows between the rows of shelving, keeping my eyes on the area where the sound was coming from. The closer I got, the more real my fear became. It was physical now. My hands were shaking, my mouth was dry. When I reached the end of the shelving unit, I looked around the corner. There was a man standing on the loading dock. He was tall, maybe 6'3", wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low. He wasn't doing anything with the boxes. He was just standing there, completely still, looking at something on the dock. looking at the entrance codes written on the wall, the ones that unlocked the side doors. That was when I realized this wasn't random. This wasn't somebody who was supposed to be here. I don't know what made me back away so carefully, some instinct. But I did. I moved backwards slowly, keeping my eyes on him, and he didn't see me. Or at least I don't think he did. He was too focused on whatever he was studying. My brain was racing. Call the cops. That's what I should do. Get out of the warehouse, get to my car, call the police. But I was terrified that if I moved toward my locker, toward the front of the warehouse, he'd hear me. That he'd know I was there. I backed all the way to the office area at the front of the facility. My hands were actually shaking as I grabbed my phone from my locker. I pulled it out, ready to dial 911, and that's when I heard the side door unlock. The one he'd been studying. He was moving deeper into the warehouse. The cops arrived in 11 minutes. I watched from outside, standing in the parking lot in the cold March air, and I saw them clear the entire warehouse. Every corner, every closet. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry except for the loading dock door, which apparently had a mechanical malfunction. The codes on the wall had been studied, sure, but there was no evidence of tampering. No way to prove he'd actually been there except for the fact that I saw him. The detective who interviewed me was polite but skeptical. Nobody else was there to confirm my story. The security footage from that night never made it to his desk. There'd been a glitch in the system of all things. So I was a guy who saw an intruder that couldn't be proven to exist. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. Here's what I never told the police. 3 days after that incident, I was taking out the garbage at my apartment in Columbus, just a normal afternoon. And I found a piece of paper wedged in the side of my trash can. It was wrinkled, like it had been thrown in from outside. On it, in handwriting I'd never seen before, were 4 things written down. My full name, my address, my workplace address, and the time I arrived at work each night. Someone had been documenting me. Someone had been watching my patterns. And that man in the warehouse, he wasn't there randomly. He wasn't trying to steal. He was surveying. He was checking security, checking codes, learning how to get in. And he knew exactly where I lived. I moved 3 weeks later. I quit that job. I stopped going to my regular places for a while. I changed my routine completely. Nothing ever happened after that. No break-ins, no confrontations, nothing. But I learned something that night that I can't unknow. Predators don't always strike immediately. Sometimes they plan, sometimes they watch. Sometimes they study you like you're a problem they need to solve. And sometimes they change their mind. I'll never know why he did, but I think about it every single day. These are 3 dead-of-night horror stories. Like this video and let me know in the comments, have you ever experienced something unexplainable in your own home?